Further debate? I recognize the member from Orleans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, colleagues. In 2018, the Premier promised to cut Ontarians' hydro bills by 12%. That promise was broken. Average hydro bills have actually gone up, not down, since he's taken office. The Premier himself warned back then that hiding hydro costs in debt would burden our children and our great-grandchildren. Yet here we are in 2025. Instead of real relief, the Premier's government has embraced the same shell game he once denounced. They claim that hydro rates are affordable while shuffling the costs around and out of sight. So how is the government supposedly making hydro appear cheaper? By using your tax dollars to subsidize electricity costs. And Bill 40 doubles down on that trick. It lets the government pay electricity generators and utilities with money from the legislature, i.e. taxpayer funds, instead of having consumers cover the full costs on their hydro bills. In plain terms, Mr. Speaker, you are still paying, just through your taxes rather than your electricity statement. And so if that's true, then in fact the Premier and his government have in fact raised taxes, because, as we know, hydro rates are up, not down. It looks like they took charges off one bill and put them on another. That is a classic shell game, Mr. Speaker. Hydro rates aren't magically lower. As we've already said, they're higher. But the costs are simply hidden on the public ledger. This subsidy scheme hides the true cost of electricity from Ontarians. When people don't see the real price of power, there's less pressure on government to fix the root problems. Bill 40 continues writing blank checks to everyone, instead of targeting relief to those who truly need it. And that's not responsible policy, that's politics and optics. Today, Mr. Speaker, over $7 billion a year from the Ministry of Energy's budget is spent on electricity price mitigation. Fancy words for hydro subsidies. That's more than 3 cents of every tax dollar that you pay, siphoned off to artificially lower electricity bills. Think about that. Out of every dollar in taxes, a chunk of it is going to cover up high hydro rates instead of funding schools, funding hospitals, funding tax relief. It's not free money. It's taxpayer money, Mr. Speaker. And if the province doesn't have a surplus lying around, and we know that this government doesn't, then where do those billions come from? It comes from debt. The magical four-letter word this government loves, debt. The government is piling up public debt to bankroll this scheme, meaning that our kids and our grandkids will end up paying for today's hydro discounts with interest. Far from securing affordable energy for future generations, Bill 40 is setting future generations up to pay the price. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because this government cares more about the optics than the outcomes. By masking costs with subsidies, they can wave around low hydro rates on paper while ignoring the actual problem, the high cost of producing and delivering power. Even members of the Premier's own party have admitted that shuffling costs hasn't done anything to reduce the actual cost of producing electricity. And that's exactly right. The underlying expenses are still there. The infrastructure, the contracts, the market inefficiencies, none of that gets cheaper just because the government uses taxpayer dollars, to cover part of the bill. Now, Bill 40 offers an illusion of affordability. It's a short-term political fix that does nothing to make energy genuinely more efficient or affordable in the long run. So let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, about what Bill 40 does. It openly authorizes the government to take costs that normally would be on your hydro bill and to pay them out of the Treasury instead, to use taxes to pay that hydro bill instead. In legal terms, those costs will be paid out of money appropriated by the legislature. In human terms, they're putting it on your tab as a taxpayer. Normally, in a normal situation, the independent regulator, the OEB, would make sure that the rates that you pay, that I pay, that everyone pays, would cover the cost of electricity. Nothing more, nothing less. But under this plan, if the government wants to curry favor by undercharging for power, they'll just plug the gap with tax money. It's moving the expense from one pocket to another and hoping that no one notices that they've got both hands in our pockets, Mr. Speaker. Bill 40 is a grand illusion. The government wants to disguise electricity costs using public dollars so that the bills look lower. It's like printing a lower price on a product, but quietly adding the difference to your credit card bill. It's the sleight of hand, and that sleight of hand, might fool some people in the short run, Mr. Speaker, but it's not real affordability. Real affordability comes from lowering costs, not by hiding them. By pouring subsidies in and keeping prices artificially low, the government actually discourages energy conservation and efficiency. People have less reason to save power when it seems cheap. Economists warn that these distorted prices are fiscally unsustainable and undermine energy conservation.
I will interrupt the member to caution him on his use of language with regard to some of the terms he's using.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the end, though, Mr. Speaker, someone always pays through taxes or through debt. And in this case, Mr. Speaker, that someone is Ontarian taxpayers. There's no magic. It's just a costly illusion. And this whole approach threatens Ontario's future on multiple fronts. First, on affordability. It might feel good now, but it's a trap. Today's subsidy party will lead to higher costs tomorrow when the bills come due with interest. Second, on transparency. By bearing the costs in this government's books, Bill 40 makes it harder for the public to see what's really going on. When hydro prices don't reflect reality, families and businesses can't plan, there's less accountability, and there is more susceptibility for waste. Third, productivity. Hiding true costs means that there's less pressure to innovate and improve efficiency. An economy where energy prices are manipulated is one where productivity growth falls behind because there's less incentive to invest in new technology or smarter energy use. In short, the policy undermines the very goals we should be striving for: affordable energy, open and honest government, and a more productive economy. And Mr. Speaker, the Ontario Energy Board is basically, in this bill, the Ontario Energy Board is basically told to stand down. In fact, the bill adds a new section, I think it's 28.1, that says certain big electricity users can only be connected to the grid under rules that the Cabinet will later set by regulation. All the details are left to the government's regulations, with no guiding principles written into the law. That means decisions about who gets power connections, on what terms, could be made behind closed doors without the usual transparent process. It's a recipe for political interference with the public and even the legislature kept in the dark. It's a recipe for the government's next political fundraising scandal. And so I have to ask, will the Minister of Energy be the next minister who's open for business? Now, Mr. Speaker, a curious change in Bill 40 even lets the CEO of the Ontario Energy Board set internal rules about how quickly to hold hearings and what evidence to consider. Why meddle with the OEB procedures? It looks like it's a move to tighten control over the regulator. The clear message: if the independent regulator tries to protect consumers in a way that upsets a well-connected company, this government, is going to change the rules. With Bill 40, they are preemptively stacking the deck. Decisions might no longer be made purely on the evidence and the public interest, but rather on the political orders of the government. Political orders influenced by, perhaps, political contributions. It's a pattern we've seen before, Mr. Speaker. The bill's changes allow what you might call backdoor subsidies. Instead of openly raising hydro rates, which of course would upset many people, or having a full debate on spending, the government can quietly funnel money to energy companies through legislative appropriations and then order the Energy Board to lower the rates accordingly. It's all done outside of public view, baked into the provincial budget, which is hard for the average Ontarian to trace to their hydro bill. There's no line on your hydro bill that says covered by taxpayer funds. But maybe if this bill passes, Mr. Speaker, we should recommend that that line be added to everyone's hydro bill. I think that the lack of transparency is by design. By bypassing the usual regulatory scrutiny, the government can claim political credit for lower hydro rates while hiding the true cost in the form of just general government spending. It's an accounting trick that insults the public's intelligence, assuming that we won't figure it out. We won't figure out who's paying for what. You know, Mr. Speaker, when you strip away oversight and hide real costs, you open the door to crony capitalism. All these new powers, cabinet setting connection rules in secret, the OEB told to prioritize a certain agenda, billions in subsidies up for grabs. It's a recipe for well-connected insiders to game the system. Unfortunately, this government has a track record that gives us reason to worry. Handing out discretionary power with no clear principles invites lobbying, and it invites favoritism. Who is going to get those big industrial connections or hefty subsidies? Will it be whoever has the Premier's ear or is a friend to the party? Ontario has already seen scandals where political buddies come first and public interest comes last. Bill 40, by concentrating so much discretionary control in the Cabinet's hands, is practically an invitation to backroom deals. So, Mr. Speaker, the government's approach emphasizes short-term economic growth spurts, really, often just spending lots of public money for a ribbon-cutting photo op instead of addressing the structural problems that would actually make life better. They brag about jobs created or investments attracted, but how many of those are propped up by big subsidies taxpayers are paying for? Real prosperity isn't built on the government writing ever bigger checks. It comes from improving productivity, doing more with less, spurring innovation, and cutting waste. Yet neither Bill 40 nor the government's integrated energy plan even mention productivity growth. Not once do they mention productivity growth, Mr. Speaker. They're busy chasing flashy projects and calling it growth that ignore foundational efficiencies that truly lower costs and raise living standards. In the end, it's all about looking good now, not building for the future or building a stronger economy. So let's talk about productivity for a second, because it's the missing piece in Bill 40. Productivity growth is how we make progress without simply throwing more money or labor at a problem. It's about innovation, smarter work, and better technology, basically getting more value out of each dollar and each hour. Over time, that is the only path to sustainably higher living standards and affordability. The bill is fixated on spending and subsidizing, not on modernizing. By ignoring productivity, the government is missing the chance to actually lower the cost of energy in the long run. Instead of encouraging efficiency and innovation in the energy sector, they're just writing checks to cover up the existing inefficiency. The government keeps touting economic growth, but what kind of growth are we getting? If the government spends billions of dollars to create temporary jobs or to entice a company or a business to come to Ontario, they might call it a win. But do debt-driven subsidies really demonstrate real economic health, or is it just a short-term kind of economic sugar high? There's a big difference between pumping money into the economy for short-term bump and fostering a competitive, productive economy that grows on its own strength. With Bill 40, the Conservative government is effectively saying, trust us. Whatever we decide is economic growth is worth putting onto your hydro bill or onto your tax bill. That's a blank check. It's optics over outcomes once again, creating the appearance of growth while the underlying fundamentals, like efficiency and innovation in the energy grid, are ignored again. Now, Mr. Speaker, we don't have to guess what happens when governments chase growth through spending sprees and political allocation of resources. History is chock full of these tales. Look at Japan in the 1990s, the often so-called lost decades. The government poured money into massive infrastructure projects. Some literally became famous bridges to nowhere, all to prop up economic growth stats. Politically connected areas got the cash, not necessarily the areas in real need or potential. The result, stagnant productivity and a mountain of debt. That's what crony capitalism yields. You might see short-term growth on paper, but you don't get the productivity gains that actually improve people's lives. We have to avoid this path. Bill 40, with its blank check, subsidies, and politicized energy planning, risk turning our energy sector into a wasteful boondoggle, costly projects that boost a few stats while families see little benefit. Mr. Speaker, Ontario's debt is already enormous, and a big chunk of it comes from schemes to artificially lower electricity prices. The Auditor General has warned in the past about these tricks to keep hydro costs off the books, and those warnings have not been heeded by this government. In each case, the pattern is the same. Borrow or spend public money to hide costs, call it relief, and then claim victory. But the bills come due. You can't repeal the laws of economics. Someone always pays. With Bill 40, the government wants to keep doubling down. More subsidies, more debt, more pretending. It's like trying to cure a hangover by taking another shot of whiskey. It might extend the illusion for a little bit, but it only makes the eventual problem that much worse. What happens if we continue down this road, Mr. Speaker? If we pass Bill 40 and normalize these subsidies and political meddling, Ontario could end up and will end up with higher electricity costs in the long run, a less reliable grid, and a pile of debt to show for it. By refusing to address the real drivers of costs and even blocking the transparency that would reveal them to the public and to the legislature, the government guarantees that the problems will fester. Ontarians, I think, are fair-minded. We can handle the truth. What we need and what Bill 40 fails to provide is transparency and honesty about the cost of electricity. If building new supply or upgrading the grid is going to cost money, let that cost be visible. Don't hide it in a maze of subsidies. And then let's debate the best way to manage the cost. Maybe it's worth using tax dollars to ease the burden on low-income families or to invest in green energy. But those choices should be made in open, with clear eyes, not through sneaky legislative tricks. A real integrated energy plan would be exactly that, integrated with a sound fiscal plan as one piece of Ontario's economic puzzle. Instead of chasing headlines, we should focus on making the system more efficient and reliable, which truly brings down bills over time. That means leveraging technology, encouraging conservation, and planning smartly for the future, none of which you will find in Bill 40. If the government was serious about affordable energy for generations, it would be talking about productivity and efficiency every chance it gets. It's productivity growth, finding better ways to generate and use power that will keep energy affordable in the long run. Instead of pouring billions into masking prices, we should be investing in making our grids smarter and our buildings more efficient, because every dollar spent on hiding costs is a dollar not spent on solving the problem. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions? I turn to the Solicitor General.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government believes that when you invest in your province, you should have something on the balance sheet. It's called an asset that you leave to another generation. When we build something, we own it. It's something that can be passed on. When the Liberals were in office, there was nothing they left us, not one long-term care bed, not one hydro plant, nothing except solar fields and wind farms at 10 to 15 times the actual cost to generate power. So I want to ask my friend across the aisle, does he think that was fair?
Good question.
I recognize the member from Orleans.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Solicitor General is a smart man, and he knows that statement is blatantly untrue and risks actually distorting the public record to the legislature.
I have to ask you to withdraw that.
There were...
But will you withdraw the comment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There were many dozens, if not hundreds, of infrastructure projects under the previous government that left a lasting record for Ontarians. His government is choosing to spend nearly $7 billion a year in hydro subsidies. That's not building a single thing. That is taking money from your left pocket to put it into your right pocket and hoping that Ontarians don't realize his hands are in both our pockets. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I go to the member from Timiskaming.
Thank you, Speaker. I listened intently to the speech from the member, and I wonder if he's now an independent. because he said things like shuffling in costs, illusion of affordability, disguise. I agreed with most of the speech. But at least, and I'm not a conservative supporter, at least you can see where they're subsidizing, as opposed to the Liberal affordable hydro plan where you tried to mask it in the books of Ontario power generation. Like everything you said was accurate, but your party was way worse. Way worse. You sold Hydro One. You couldn't
Question,
get
please.
an auditor to pass your books. Like, please, look in a mirror, man.
I recognize the member from Orleans.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member knows, I was not here under the previous government, so when I look in the mirror, I look in the mirror and see someone who delivered enormous infrastructure investments for the people of Orleans and Ottawa. I would ask, but in that vein, Mr. Speaker, I would ask my colleague from the NDP, since he is so connected to the past and what previous governments have done, given that this government has dramatically raised the debt, just like Bob Rae did when Bob Rae tripled Ontario's debt in only 5 years, does the member see himself closely aligned with the debt-driven, high-spending, high-subsidy party that now forms government?
Next question. I recognize the member from Nepean.
Thank you, Speaker. So when I came in here, I actually had no idea what you all were even debating. All I kept hearing is about the former Liberal government that hasn't been in power since 2018. It's amazing how we still live rent-free in your heads. I hear the member here shouting about gas plants. It's just, are we not here to debate a bill about energy? This is wild. And the fact that this government is so obsessed with the former Liberal government shows to me that there is stuff that is wrong in this bill, and you know it because you're trying to distract people from what's actually going on. My question is to my colleague. Are you worried about this bill being interfered once again by political direction from the minister's office?
The member from Orleans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, this bill removes safeguards, gives electricity policy decision-making directly to political operators, whether that's the minister and cabinet or, as we've seen with this government, other political staff. That is a recipe for this government has transitioned their political fundraising scandal from being about land to now it's about labor, and the next political fundraising scandal will be about electricity. Mark my words, the Minister of Energy's Riding Association will get a wave of donations. This is how they're going to pivot to the next scandal.
Questions? I go to the member from Simcoe Gray.
Thank you. To the member from Quinte. I'm happy to rise and join this conversation. It seems to me from the conversations we've heard it was quite a revisionist speech, and I agree with the member from Timiskaming Cochrane about the ongoing costs. And the member in his comments made a lot about the subsidy in terms of keeping hydro rates down and wondering where that came from. And the FAO report showed that a direct sell-off of Hydro One meant that Ontario lost between $444 and $487 million a year going forward from 2025. That's an annual amount that we've lost. It also is interesting to note that as a result of the green energy programs that were referenced in the Solicitor General's comments, that this government is having to pay off costs where we were buying energy for 20 times the going rate and then selling it off for a lower rate. If the member opposite wants to know where the shortfall comes from that we're making up, it comes from the Liberal government.
And I go to the member from Orleans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm reminded of an anecdote which I first learned of while watching my favorite television program. The government is trying to sell Ontarians a truckload of white salmon. They're putting a label on it, guaranteed not to go pink in the can. This is the highest debt Ontario has ever seen. $137 billion in new debt under this government. $137 billion in new debt under this government. Hydro prices are higher than they were when they were elected. The number of unemployed Ontarians is higher than where they were elected. The number of jobs in Ontario is lower than when they were elected.
Next question, the member from Sudbury.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you to my friend from Orleans. A few things he said. He said, in 2018, the Conservatives promised to cut hydro by 12%. The Premier was not able to do that. Rates have continued to increase. 3 cents to every tax dollar you pay now goes towards subsidizing hydro rates. And then you said the subsidy party has come to an end because it comes back with interest. This party was started under the Liberal government, right? And like a lot of things the Liberal government hasn't done well, the Conservatives have been like, hold my beer, and also how bad we can make it. So your party started digging the hole. They started digging deeper. How do you figure we're going to get out of this?
Go to the member from Orleans.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, certainly you don't get out of the hole by continuing to dig, and that's what this government has done. The $7 billion a year in hydro subsidies and $137 billion in new debt is a heck of a big hole. But if we want to go back in time a little bit, we can go back to the 12 days of unpaid leave that the Ray government forced on all public servants. We can go back on an NDP government that tripled Ontario's debt in 5 short years. We can go back and talk about the mistakes of the past, or we can do what we were brought here to do, Mr. Speaker, and build for the future. We're proposing to build and talk about the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'll go to the Minister of Rural Affairs.
Okay, thank you very much, Speaker. I find it interesting listening to the debate today because I feel very strongly that, we have an opposition party that does not support nuclear. We have a third party that did nothing really to resurrect the mess that the opposition party made in nuclear. In the 90s, I remember the ghost town that Kincardine was, that main street, really was negatively impacted when they tried to mothball Bruce Power. No one at the time was Douglas Point. It was a progressive conservative party that brought nuclear back to the forefront to demonstrate the efficiencies that can be realized through a reliable, affordable, innovative, and my goodness, we're even fighting cancer now.
The member from Orleans.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respond by saying I was in elementary school in the 1990s, so I don't have the same first-hand knowledge of the complete foul-up the NDP government made of the province. I do remember going to high school, though, in the 1990s under the Mike Harris Conservative government, and remember teachers being on strike. I remember overcrowded classrooms, and I remember a government that was hiding that was hiding public deficits in crown corporations, and those memories seem to...